We are legends.
We have with us guest DP0427, and we'll get into a little bit more of a, I would say, a larger collaboration between our two podcasts. And for our 1-year anniversary episode, I never really talk pop culture, and I get all of my information from the Oddsman. So DP is usually the one who gives me my information from all the shows that we watch. So we wanted to have him on to talk about Krypton, because I absolutely love that show, and I'm not a big fan of a lot of the other CW shows. I've fallen off on most of them, but Krypton I was super impressed with. So we wanted to chat about that a little bit.
Awesome. So just a note, Krypton is actually not the CW show. It's a sci-fi show, the SYFY channel.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and you can clearly see the difference between the networks. When you watch the show. So, but yeah, the show is awesome.
Just the overall storyline, I felt like, was just significantly better. Well, I like, don't get me wrong, I like a lot of the CW shows, but for example, Flash first season, really enjoyed it, was really into it, and then Barry just cries so much in every episode that I couldn't do it anymore.
That's a lot of the same reactions that people have for that series. Like, I think the actor, he's a decent actor for Barry Allen, but it's just that the way they took Barry Allen, I don't know if it's him or if it's the writers, but yeah, it kind of went off in a weird direction. But I think he's a good actor. It might not be his fault, right? So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, he could be a good teen drama actor. He pigeoned himself whole. And it's funny because when they first announced the movie, and then people were upset that he wasn't going to be the Flash in the movie. Now I'm so happy he wasn't the Flash in the movie in Justice League.
Oh yeah. I think that in terms of him as the Flash, he's a decent Barry Allen, but our take on Barry Allen, especially with people who grew up with the comics, is that Barry Allen's this, like, blonde guy who sort of he's a very in-your-face, comical type of character. And this guy, he's funny, but not in the same sort of comic ha-ha type of Barry Allen way. So it's not exactly the same person.
Yeah.
So it's a different spin on him. I do like all the other characters on the show, though, how they like made Caitlin as Killer Frost and Cisco as Vibe, and they're decent representations of those characters. So
yeah, it's not a bad show. It's just I have limited time between the podcast, the game. I've gotten into Call of Duty, Black Ops 4 lately, and then all the real life.
That sucks up a lot of your time.
So between all of that, something has to give, and usually it's TV.
Yeah. Well, let's not talk about too much about CW, because that's a whole other can of worms. We're here to talk about Krypton, right?
Which, if you haven't seen Krypton, for those of you out there, it was so good. Like, I couldn't believe how much I enjoyed it.
All right, well, let's talk about Season 1 then. So, I mean, from Season 1, what did you like?
Well, I liked the representation of Brainiac. He made that series for me. I mean, I really liked the other characters, and I liked how the spin on Zod that they did and everything that they did along with those lines. But just the special effects and the character and the way they portrayed Brainiac, I felt like they did him perfect in representation of the comic.
Brainiac looks very interesting in terms of his costume. He's very true to what we know as like this sort of Injustice Brainiac, and a lot of the more recent comics, the way he's drawn, he looks very, very close to that Brainiac. So I like that.
Well, even the movie on Injustice, or I think it was Injustice 2, the Xbox game, I was so hyped for it because of the way they did the intro with Brainiac. It just looked so cool. And then I remembered I don't like fighting games that much, but it really got me hyped for the game, and it was mainly because Brainiac is just such a cool character. Yeah.
The thing, well, not too much of a spoiler for people who haven't already played Injustice 2. It actually has a lot of different cinematics, and it actually has sort of those Telltale style of stories where if you choose one path, the story ends one way, and if you choose a different path, it ends a different way. So it revolves around Brainiac and Superman, obviously, so it's actually quite interesting. So, but the way Brainiac is the center for that game, it makes a lot of sense to me. And the way Brainiac is on the center for season 1 also is quite interesting. But if you think of season 1, now, do you think Brainiac is like obviously the biggest thing there, or is there anything else that we need to focus on in season 1?
Well, for those of you that haven't seen it, that's spoiler alert, but the Doomsday coming into the show. Yeah, I mean, they did him justice, too. He looked super cool.
We didn't get to see too much of him because he's behind like a glass thing, right? So, and then he just escapes after, right? We don't get to see him like up close and personal that much, right? So,
well, I heard on your last episode, Oddsman, that Lobo was potentially in the next season, which I'm super excited for.
It's been confirmed, and there's a picture of the actor in costume and in makeup. Now, I was just talking about Ogre about that. So he was saying that for him, the main man has to be big, right? The main man has to be sort of like big and bulky, kind of like a wrestler style.
Yes,
and I agree with him, especially with what we've seen in the animated series and the comics. Now, what I saw from the picture, it's not that at all. It looks like some guy who is maybe, I would say, I don't know, like 150, 160, and he hit the gym for a couple of months and he looks okay, but he's not like, a guy who's been a wrestler all his life, right? He doesn't look like that. So, in terms of the makeup, though, he does kind of look like Brainiac. Kind of looks like that. He has a sort of that gray skin look. He has that sort of like hair. His hair is like in dreads or something.
You mean
he
Lobo?
Does look?
You said Brainiac.
Yeah, Lobo. Yeah. Sorry, I was saying Brainiac. Yeah, Lobo. I meant Lobo. Yeah.
I just actually Googled it while you were talking. I mean, he looks okay. Like it depends if he.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been impressed with everything they've done on the show so far, so I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt initially.
Yeah. The interesting thing I like about the series, too, aside from Adam Strange, everyone in the series seems to be British, right? And it kind of calls back to that whole Marlon Brando period of Superman when Marlon Brando was Jor-El. Mm-hmm. And that representation was the first representation of Jor-El on screen, right? And it gives you an idea that Kryptonians are actually British. It gives you sort of this, they're better than us type of feel. Not to say that, rich people are better than us or arrogant or whatever, right? But it gives you that sort of classy feel to Kryptonians, right? And they take that throughout this series, too, because everyone has sort of that accent, right? Now, the interesting thing I'm thinking now is that is Lobo, because Lobo is an assassin, right? Well, he's not an assassin, he's a mercenary for hire, and he's from another planet. He's coming to Krypton. Is he going to be like the other Kryptonians, or is he going to have his own, way of talking? Because part of what makes Lobo Lobo is the way he talks, right? So I'm wondering how they're going to do that. I hope they're not going to, sort of lump him in with the rest of them, with the rest of class, so.
I don't think so. I have a feeling he'll be... I don't know. They've kept characters pretty true to form, considering how they did it as kind of a prequel, and have that kind of limitations that they self-inflicted upon themselves. But so far, they've done a really good job with it. So, like how they brought in the other villains and.
Now, what's your take on the Zods, the Zod family?
It's interesting how they did it, but I'm unclear exactly how they're going to move forward with it at this point after the finale of season 1.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, should we talk about the finale of season 1?
Yeah, I guess if you haven't seen it yet and you're about to watch it, I would say tune out for the next couple minutes.
Right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all right, I guess with that then, like the fact that the cape that Adam Strange brings, that shows it's Superman's cape and saying how we have to save Superman, has the emblem of the House of L on it. It changes to the emblem of the House of Zod at the end. And you see Zod, General Zod, who comes from the future, to basically be there and rule over Krypton. Now, there's a lot of things that I don't get in this storyline that, I mean, I see where they're going, where the writing is going, but there's so many things, like, canonically, and so many things, if you think of, like, time travel, it just doesn't make sense, right? How can Zod rule over Krypton now and then in the future, too, right?
Yeah,
that's going to be so weird.
That's one thing that always bothers me with the time travel, and I knew they were going to have to almost do it because of the way the storyline's structured.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, like it's not gonna stick, right? It's gonna be something that they're gonna thwart and they're gonna have to sort of reverse, or else Superman won't exist, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The other thing is that Zod in history fights against Jor-El, and then he gets banished to the Phantom Zone, right? So because of that, that's the reason why he comes and fights Superman later in the future. So the question is that that whole storyline can't happen if Jor-El never exists, right?
Yeah.
So, and then that whole part of him becoming General Zod, becoming that sort of nemesis to Superman won't ever happen either. So that's part of him developing as a person too. It's the fact that he has that anger towards Superman, right? And the reason why he has to go back and make sure things don't happen so that Superman doesn't exist makes him not into that person. So basically, if you're thinking of like Flash and Flashpoint, that kind of thing, right? That whole arc won't ever happen if he becomes the ruler of of Krypton.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
but it seems like writers take whatever liberties they want with time travel.
Yeah.
So,
now, on the talk of Krypton as a series, if you were to compare it to another series, like anything in pop culture that you watch that you like, how close is it to something else that you like?
I don't know. It's kind of its own thing. The only other show that I would say reminds me of a little bit in kind of a roundabout sort of way is I just blanked out the name of it. It's the one that's set in the future, and there's Mars, Earth, and the asteroid.
Lost in Space?
No.
Lost in Space?
No, the other one. Mars, the asteroid belt, the Belters.
I haven't watched that. I don't know what that is.
That's a really good show. I really like that one. I can't think of the name of it, though.
Fair enough.
But I'm not a super huge TV buff. I mean, I do watch a lot of the shows, but kind of like the only other shows I really go out of my way for is I love, and I know this is a competitor, but I love Daredevil on Netflix. Such a good show.
Enough. It's all right. I mean, the Marvel shows are good. The Netflix shows are good, and you can't fault them for that. No. I mean, to be fair, DC's plunge into TV, starting with CW, didn't really set them in a good spot. But I think that they're on their way towards getting into that TV genre. But the problem is that Marvel's already too ingrained. They're too they're like a household name at this point for TV and the quality.
Yeah.
And even in movies. So Krypton that's not Krypton. DC in general is sort of competing. They're on the back foot, but they have time to catch up, hopefully.
Well, Krypton definitely I think, is on that level. I mean, I would say my favorite TV series that I've watched in eons was Daredevil season 2 with the introduction of Punisher. Like that was such a good. I think I've rewatched that 4 times, and I never rewatch it. I just love that.
I haven't watched The Punisher. Maybe I should go watch it. It's been a while.
It's so good. It is so good.
The only Marvel series I actually watched from the beginning to the end was just the first season of Daredevil, and then I watched a couple of episodes of Luke Cage, but not the rest of that. But yeah, maybe I'll go watch.
Jessica Jones is good. Luke Cage is good, but Daredevil season 2 was the pinnacle of all their shows. That was my favorite of them all. And then Punisher, the spinoff with Punisher, and Punisher and Daredevil were not characters I really liked that much in Marvel. They were okay, but I never got into them. But the show was so good that they became some of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, I'm not surprised though, because anything Netflix touches becomes gold. Honestly, because I can't think of anything that Netflix does badly. So
I like that series better than it's better than movie quality in my opinion. The way they did it.
Anyways, we're getting really carried away with Marvel.
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I mean that's DC. Yeah. That's the level DC needs to get to, and that's the pinnacle of television.
Well, what I was getting at in terms of TV quality for this series, I was saying this before the show even aired, before season 1 even started, was that Krypton from the trailers reminded me a lot of Game of Thrones in space.
Yeah, and it really does. It really does.
Season 1 really proved to be that case, because you have that sort of empire type of kingdom type of rule thing. You have this guy who's trying to become the king. You have this other villainous person in the background who's trying to take over that. And to me, Brainiac and the whole taking over the representative of Rao and the light, right, is sort of representative of the, what's the name of that thing in Game of Thrones? The Seven, right? The church.
Yeah.
So it gives me that feel to it from the beginning. But now, that guy's no longer there. Now it's just Brainiac. but it's like he's the god, right? He's the god that's there on Earth or there on the planet.
I love that scene where he comes up into the flame. That was just phenomenal, the way they did that.
It was well done. Very well done. Very well done. Now, the only element that I thought was missing, if you were to compare it to Game of Thrones, was Daenerys and the dragons, right? Now, here's another bit of a spoiler for Season 2, because I've been reading up more on my, I guess, nerdy history, or not nerdy history, but sort of nerdy news. On Screen Rant, I was just reading this about Season 2. They have confirmed casting for 2 characters as well as Lobo, for Nightwing and Flamebird. And we're not talking about Nightwing as Dick Grayson's Nightwing. Nightwing and Flamebird are Kryptonian gods. So they are, in a way, they're kind of like Hawkman and Hawkgirl, like Shiara, and I can't remember his name, Hawkman's Egyptian name. So basically, the story of those 2 Egyptians who they're like lovers. They keep dying, and they have to find each other every lifetime. Like every time they resurrect each other. Flamebird and Nightwing are the same way, but on Krypton, and they're Kryptonians, but they're gods. They have the power of, like, basically majestic firebirds, right? And one is the opposite of the other. Like basically, they're sort of yin and yang type of representations of balance in Kryptonian culture, right? And as the name implies, Flamebird is a big bird of flame, like a phoenix, right? And one builds things up and the other one takes things down, and that's sort of like the relationship with each other. But now, and the reason why that's important is because the history of these 2 gods is important to Kryptonian history, because Kal-El learns about that in the future when he's born and when he's a child growing up, and tells that story to a young Dick Grayson. So that's also important for Dick Grayson to become Nightwing, or else he'll never become Nightwing, right? So that's part of the reason why. So I'm wondering, because Nightwing in the comics, if you look at how the Egyptian gods are drawn, he's drawn in sort of a black and blue suit. So I'm wondering if they're going to have a character in a black and blue suit.
They've gone really deep into the comic book lore with that show.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another thing I really like about it as well.
Super deep. And actually, and anyone who's a big fan of the Superman canon will appreciate that. But they're very, very, very minuscule things that I actually had to re-dig up. Like, I remember reading about these things when I was really young. So, I forgot a lot of it. And I actually thought that Doomsday was something later in the future created by scientists in the time of Jor-El. But actually, he was created 250,000 years in the history of Krypton, so way, 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 way before.
Which made it fit for the show.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So the only thing that I don't understand is I don't know much about Lobo's history. So how is Lobo around the time of Seg-El? So
well, as far as I know, he's immortal and he's been around forever and a day. So I think it fits in the canon as well. Yeah.
Ogre's thinking that Lobo's probably going to be a gopher for Brainiac, and Brainiac's going to tell him to go do something, and he's going to go do that. So I don't know.
There's a good possibility that could be the case.
Yeah. Now, I'm wondering about Brainiac in general, because Brainiac, in the way he's represented in the comics, he's basically just a collector, right? He shrinks things down to size and puts them in bottles. So, but the way he's represented on this series, it seems like he's going to blow things up. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Well, he was taking the city, and then that destroys the rest of the city. So I don't think he's intentionally seeking out to destroy everything. He's just collecting it. And the collection is causing the destruction of the planet.
Right, which is another thing, right? Putting Kandor in a bottle, which is part of the whole Brainiac lore. Yeah, it happens too early if they're going to do that, right? Because you're supposed to put Kandor in a bottle at the period of, I think, Jor-El, right? Like during Jor-El's time. So. Well,
I mean, if that's all the liberty they're going to take, they've kept they've done a really good job of sticking with the storyline as closely as they possibly could. So, if that's the liberty they're going to take, I think most fans could live with that.
Yeah. Yeah, but overall, the writing's been good. I hope that they get into it a little bit more deeper, but I hope they don't do something cringy like, the whole thing with Val-El, where he was dead but then not dead, that whole thing. Like, I'm not sure. I guess in the end he was dead. But there was a whole idea of they have the liberty to bring any character back at any time. That sort of rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because if things go badly, he's back now. Don't worry about it. So
yeah, I don't want to see that. Flash did way too much of that.
Yeah. So I hope they don't, because the whole thing is revolved around time travel and Adam Strange is there. I hope they don't get carried away with that. So
Adam Strange's character is the other one I'm not thrilled with. He kind of fits the character in the comic, but he just annoys the actor for some reason. Annoys.
He's too whiny.
Yeah.
He's too whiny and like crybaby-ish because Adam Strange in the comics and in the animated series, he's more of like this cool scientist who knows what he's doing, and he ends up on another planet, and he's like, I'm here to show you how we do things on Earth, right? So this guy is just sort of like, he's a loser, and he's here to show why he's not a loser.
Did you like the show? Consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/WeRRRLegends for more information.
Thanks for listening. You're not going to say anything?
We are legends.